The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
House Bill 2238, a bill to amend the Code of Virginia relating to parental choice education savings accounts. Report from the Committee on Education with a substitute on February 2nd. Report from the Committee on Appropriations with a substitute on February 6th.
Gentleman from Loudoun, Mr. LaRocque.
Mr. Speaker, I move to reject the education substitute and adopt the appropriations substitute.
The question is on the adoption of the substitute offered by the Committee on Education. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
That substitute is rejected. The question now is on adopting the substitute offered by the Committee on Appropriations. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That substitute is agreed to. The gentleman from Loudoun.
Mr. Speaker, this bill creates a new opportunity for special needs kids who are struggling in a public school where their needs are not being met. The bill would give parents the option to strike out on their own and create a customized educational portfolio to meet the unique needs of their child. In doing so, this would put the needs of the kids first. The education savings account this bill creates will only use a portion of the state funding that would have been spent on these kids if they had stayed in the public school. As a result, schools will be left with a higher per pupil funding. The Commonwealth will save money. Kids will be better off. The program, which has been rolled out in another state, has 100% satisfaction rating as it has been implemented. This will take pressure off public schools that are having a hard time meeting their FAPE, F-A-P-E, federal. I'm going to need some help with that acronym. Excuse me, sir, it's late. The FAPE obligations to special needs students. I encourage all of you to take this opportunity to throw a lifeline to struggling special needs children. If I may, briefly how it works. If a child is eligible and leaves the public school system, 90% of the state funding goes to the managed savings account, similar to a health savings account. 10% stays with the state. Again, no local dollars would be touched. Eligibility is determined by the local school. Appeals would be made to the local school. I encourage you to support this bill, and I move that it be engrossed and passed to its third reading.
The gentleman from Charlottesville, Mr. Toscano.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield for a question?
Will the gentleman yield?
I will.
Gentleman yields.
Mr. Speaker, I asked the gentleman just a few minutes ago, I thought I heard him say that the final decision about whether a child would go to the private school would be made by the local school division. Did I hear that correctly? Because I didn't see that in the bill. So is that true that the local school division makes the final choice?
Mr. Speaker, I reply to the gentleman from Charlottesville by saying that the school district would make the determination of eligibility.
Follow-up question, Mr. Speaker.
Will the gentleman yield?
I will.
Yields.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I'd ask the gentleman on page 30, on line 31 of his bill, it talks about what is a qualified school, and it says that it's a private sectarian or non-sectarian elementary or secondary school. Would I then conclude that a qualified school then could be a religious school?
Mr. Speaker, I would say to the gentleman from Charlotte that that would be a determination where the money would be spent. That determination would be made by the parent, and it could include a private sectarian school, yes.
Mr. Speaker, follow-up question.
Will the gentleman yield?
I will.
Gentleman yields.
Mr. Speaker, I'd ask the gentleman that there are plenty of very fine religious schools out there, but I'm always curious about the unintended consequences of a bill like this. And so I guess I would ask the gentleman if a qualified school could be any religious school, is it possible then that under your bill you would be sending public dollars, public state dollars, to support a Muslim school, a madras, as they say, madrasas, that teaches Sharia law?
Mr. Speaker, I would say to the gentleman from Charlottesville that we do not intend to make the decision for parents what school. This is a bill that is intended to open up options to parents. Whether or not they chose to send their school to a jihad school would ultimately, I guess, be up to them. I'm not aware if any of them exist in Virginia, but again, this is meant to enable
Mr.
parents
Speaker.
who are motivated. Mr. Speaker, I defer to the gentleman from Shenandoah.
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman from Charlottesville yield for a question?
I got too many people on the floor right now. I'll wait till the gentleman from Loudon finishes his response, and I'll wait till the gentleman from Charlottesville finishes his questions.
Mr. Speaker, speak to the bill at the appropriate time.
Gentleman will do that. The gentlewoman from Richmond City, Ms. McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Gentlewoman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While I commend the gentleman for the intent of this bill, there are a couple of issues that I think raise potential constitutional problems, one of which was explored by the questions from the gentleman of Charlottesville. Article 8, Section 10 of the Constitution of Virginia prohibits the appropriation of public funds to sectarian private schools. And as we heard, this bill would allow in some circumstances for the funds that are going into these accounts to be spent at religious schools. And so for that reason, I have some constitutional concerns with the bill. The second concern is if you look at lines 170 to 171 of the bill, basically 168 to 171 of the bill, basically what the bill says is if you receive money from the savings account, you are not considered an agent of the state or the federal government. And it also says that no school would be required to alter its creed, practices, admission policies, etc., to receive that money. Under the U.S. Constitution and the state constitution, the state is prohibited, and agents of the state are prohibited from discriminating on the basis of a number of factors, including race, religion, sex, and some other factors. What that language does is remove these schools, these private schools, from those prohibitions. They're also not covered by the Civil Rights Act, the Federal Civil Rights Act, unless they receive federal funding. So if you have a private school that does not receive federal funding, it can discriminate on the basis of race, sex, religion, and a number of other things, not be considered an agent of the state, and receive state funding. And I just don't think, even though we want to provide alternatives for disabled students, I don't think we want to do so if the school that they end up going to violates public policy and the spirit of our Constitution by discriminating on impermissible grounds. And for that reason, with this language still in the bill, I cannot support it, and I ask you to vote against it. Thank you.
Bill from Nassau, Mr. Miller.
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman from Charlottesville yield for a question?
Will the gentleman yield?
It's not my bill, but I'd happy to yield.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I was just a bit shocked, quite frankly, that I heard the gentleman ask such a pointed question about a single religious group in the Commonwealth of Virginia and their schools. And I just thought perhaps if the gentleman from Charlottesville had a problem with the Muslim schools here in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
If the gentleman wants to make it a form of a question, if he wants to debate me, fine. I'm not making any dispersions against any religious groups. I'm asking simply a question. And I think the gentleman has said that it could go for jihadist schools if, in fact, his bill passes.